Briefly on the Sunday stream, I mentioned a story out of New Mexico of a state police officer pulling over a pickup truck for dark window tint, and the situation went horribly wrong as the truck driver whipped out an AR and gunned the officer down, leaving him to die on the roadside and taking off down the interstate. I brought this story up in the context of all the current news cycle talk about disarming the police and defunding the police and how police need to be more cautious with their use of force. The point being that lethal threats present themselves on a moment's notice. So acting like we know whether any given situation will be lethally dangerous or not ahead of time is a foolish exercise. And I only saw that story briefly, so I just took the details of it at face value. This officer pulled over this pickup truck driver because his window tint was too dark. It was just a wrong place, wrong time situation, just a routine traffic stop gone horribly wrong. Until a listener emailed me this week to let me know there is actually much more to this story, and I'm glad that he did, because this story isn't just a tragic one. It's also a very mysterious one that needs some answers. If I had watched the dashcam footage just a little longer after the shots were fired, I would have noticed some things that are very odd. This police officer is gunned down. The man driving the truck takes off down the interstate. I stopped watching there originally. But within about 30 seconds after the truck leaving, there's additional police pursuit, including unmarked police SUVs. And then a medic with a full kit is on the scene tending to the officer. More guys in tactical gear follow, and if you look at the officer's body cam footage, these are feds with full kits, scary black rifles and all. HSI is on his chest there. That's Homeland Security Investigations. Okay, so clearly then this officer wasn't just a victim of some type of wrong place, wrong time tragedy. This has to be something much more involved. Why did he have a full squad of feds decked out and ready to respond in under a minute's time right after he was shot on the side of the highway? And since they were so quick to respond, why did they seemingly just let this happen? It is highly unlikely that a federal entourage just happened to be cruising down the freeway at this exact moment in time. So what did happen then? Well, it turns out this was no routine traffic stop. This was a stop of a notorious criminal wanted by the feds for drug running along the southern border. Prior to this encounter, Homeland Security had put out a be on the lookout notice for this driver, Omar Cueva, a man with an extensive criminal history based around drug trafficking since 2002. He's taken police on dangerous high-speed chases before, he's been known to carry guns before, and he's been in and out of prison on repeated probation violations. According to the slain officer's attorney, the feds knew this man not just to be commonly and heavily armed, not just suspected of hauling massive quantities of drugs, not just frequently high on those drugs, but as known through prior attempts at detaining him, he was desperate not to be arrested. And that intel turned out to be very true, because not only did Omar Cueva murder this New Mexico State police officer, Darian Jarrett, but he also endangered many more. A short while later, he was killed in a Grand Theft Auto-style shootout with local police and U.S. Border Patrol. Witness footage of that event is also available. As far as the criminal's window tint that I had taken at face value, that was never the real reason for the stop. The feds and New Mexico State Police had instructed state and local officers to pull this guy over and develop their own probable cause for a stop and a subsequent search to find his drugs and then arrest him. Window tint is just what Officer Jarrett decided to use at the time. It was just a pretext to pull this guy over, not the real reason to pull him over. But what's odd about the rest of this encounter between Officer Jarrett and this criminal Cueva is just how calmly and casually Officer Jarrett treats it. He asks Cueva to step out of the truck and accompany him over to the police car to run his information.
Come with me to my vehicle, that way I can run your name and date of birth, and then that way I can get my return, okay?
Officer Jarrett even sees a gun on Cueva and just politely asks Cueva to hand it over to him for the duration of the stop.
Hey, real quick. You have a firearm on you? You mind if I take it off you for my safety?
Now, it's unclear if Jarrett was referring to the AR that Cueva used moments later to shoot him, or if Cueva had another gun on his hip. We know Cueva had a handgun because he used it in that shootout later. But the point is, that doesn't sound like an officer who has a full understanding that he's dealing with an incredibly dangerous armed career criminal. It sounds like an officer who does actually think this is just a routine traffic stop or something close and is treating it accordingly. So the question, obviously, is why? If Officer Jarrett knows how dangerous this criminal is, why is he treating him so casually? And if Officer Jarrett doesn't know how dangerous this criminal is, Why didn't the feds and state police give him full information and proper backup? These are the questions that Officer Jarrett's family attorney is asking and pleading with journalists to ask as well.
I don't know that the press has done that enough, quite frankly, is asking the question of Homeland Security. Why would you let this officer go into that danger, knowing full well how dangerous he was? And what is the reason for it? There is no excuse. This is just either they were afraid themselves of this guy, which is, or they just completely botched the whole thing and they have no justification and they know it.
This is family attorney Sam Bergman, who says it is his belief that the feds and state police simply allowed Officer Jarrett to unknowingly walk into an ambush and be executed.
Homeland Security agents absolutely knew how dangerous he was, but they never shared that information, in effect causing State Police Officer Jarrett to walk into an ambush and be executed.
This interview, by the way, is on the channel of Allison Morrow. It is A-plus journalistic work asking the right questions. If you're curious about this story, I highly recommend that you listen to her full piece posted Thursday. I've linked it in the description. The story is just a grab bag of important and perplexing questions to ask. As far as what stands out to me, why was Officer Jarrett alone? If he had any understanding of who this guy was, and maybe he did, the Be on the Lookout notice states generally, the guy is an armed career criminal. That's not very specific, but it is something. If even that is all you know, why would you try to make that arrest alone? And how could there be a federal convoy in the immediate vicinity seemingly watching this thing happen and knowingly letting this officer try that alone? The purported reason is because they needed to make this seem like some ordinary stop and search, but why? There was no need to invent a reason to stop and arrest this guy. According to the lawyer, he had just brandished a gun with federal agents in a drug deal sting the day prior. They had probable cause.
They had enough probable cause to arrest him right then. The day before, it is our understanding that this same person in this white truck had brandished a firearm doing a drug transaction with undercover Homeland Security people.
Why he wasn't arrested then, add that to the long list of questions too. But there was plenty of legitimate reason to arrest him on this day as well. And the answer can't possibly be resource limitations. You saw the feds swoop in with tactical kits right after the shooting. And they weren't just wearing armor, they were driving armor too.
Now remember, a quarter mile behind this stop, Homeland Security knew how dangerous he was. They're in an armored SUV with a medic inside.
If this was some tactical decision, the tactics aren't very intuitive. What is the strategic advantage to sending one officer to try to gently coax this highly dangerous, likely armed, likely high out of his mind criminal into submission when you have the resources immediately available to overwhelm him with force and the total legal justification to do it? Ultimately, all questions in this case are reduced to the most fundamental one. Was this merely negligence, as in just some dumb strategy gone wrong? Or was this malice, as in the feds tossing some expendable state officer into the pit to do the dirty work that they don't want to do?
But I think what we're seeing is they want the local police to go in and do the dirty work. And yet we have a couple of HSI officers, at least two, perhaps more, that are simply not being held accountable.
And of course, don't look to the feds to answer those questions willingly. No body cam disclosures from them. No dash cam disclosures from them. No comment whatsoever from them. Any relevant information will have to be pried from them in court, not willingly released. Whether it was negligence or malice, it wasn't just Officer Jarrett's life that was tossed aside that day. Officer Jarrett was a young man himself, only 28 years old, but he was a young father of 3, with a 4th child on the way, a child who will now never know his or her dad. I think we as citizens are entitled to at least some basic description of what sort of asks and directions the feds are giving our state and local police forces, what strategic choices are made, what dangers are assumed, and by whom. But nobody is more entitled to a specific description of what happened in this case than those kids are. And I hope they get it, even if it takes the force of a courtroom rather than the decency of voluntary disclosure. And thanks to the listener who sent me more information on this story. It's an important one that I want to follow. And if I learn more, I will certainly update later. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Parler, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.